So my name is Vikki. I'm a recovering chaos creator, controller fixer, obsessor, and I have the joy of sharing with you today. I chose the topic of resentment mostly because that's where the current LifeLab groups are at. And so, it's really what I was looking at, what I've been thinking about. And one of the questions that often comes up is, what is resentment? Or oftentimes it'll just kind of come up, at the beginning, oh, well, I don't really have any resentment. And I often find that difficult to uh, believe, I guess would be the right wording. um, and in LifeLab, we do the work in a very particular way. We have a bunch of questions that we have to answer as our first homework assignment, and they're called the heart questions, and they get us going. They kind of get things primed, and we start to see what is valuable to us, what's meaningful to us, what do we spend our time on, what is most of our focus spent on, where does most of my energy go? And then we go into another set of questions that we call the 100 questions. That's very deceptive. I apologize. But there are 189 questions, but there's also a bunch of questions factored into those questions. And so nobody's ever counted them, but it's definitely more than 100. Those questions go over our childhood and our adulthood and how our different addictions have affected us in very specific ways. What we start to see through those questions, we see a lot of emotion come up, often, whether that's like frustration, overwhelm, depression, discouragement. Some of us cry, some of us just withdraw, some of us get angry, but oftentimes it's unusual to have someone go through those questions and really not feel affected by it. And I just feel like, emotion is an excellent indication of resentment. It isn't, obviously, you can have emotion without having resentment, but it's like this indicator light on your dashboard, when that's going off, you're like, I feel like I have a really old car and those lights, they're always on. But there's some of them that you really shouldn't ignore. And so I feel like when we have strong emotion, especially when we're doing the kind of work that we do at the beginning of LifeLab, it's really important actually to kind of pay attention. I tell my PACEs, put a little asterisk, if you had strong emotion around some of the questions, make a little circle. Just pay attention, because oftentimes there's something more underneath that. And I was looking up the definition of resentment. One of the definitions that came up under, the Google definitions, I think it was like Merriam-Webster's or something. It said bitter indignation at being treated unfairly. And then some of the other words that come up are irritation, displeasure, dissatisfaction, malice, a chip on the shoulder, persistent ill will. Those are just some of the examples that come up when we talk about resentment. And John likes to use the example of resentment is when we refeel and refeel. And what happens with me, if I tell you a story about, let's say, my life, I got going the other day, someone was asking about us, and because it was our anniversary, and they start asking us questions about us and how we met and different, our history. We've been married now for 21 years, but we met when I was 17. And so there's a lot of history that happened even before we got married. And so as I start telling those stories, that level of emotion that happens is a really good indicator of where I'm at. I like to think that I have forgiven. And, I can have forgiven and still have emotion around those circumstances. But when I have emotion that's like really uncontrollable and persistent, it's very good to ask myself, have I still got some resentments here? It's very interesting to be going through this process of recovery with other people who are going through the process of recovery, because I am, as part of my process, I am looking at where do I still have resentment? And so where do things come up that I'm like, I don't think that I have let this go. Um, and the reality is that as a chaos creator or controller fixer, I am without any defense against the first obsessive thought. Like it just comes. And so it comes at me. I can't control it once it gets started. It just kind of like gets going and it becomes very internally crippling for me. The fear, deep insecurity. And then I just get obsessive. And when when that starts to happen to me again, because I've been committed to this work and I'm staying in this work, I've done a big inventory process. That doesn't mean that I'm done. I need to stay close to this work on a regular basis so that I'm actually uh, not letting things accumulate or not letting things build up or paying close attention to my warning signals on my dashboard. If I leave the warning signals because I have an old car and I just leave them, sometimes it's hard for me to tell, is there really something wrong or is there not something wrong with my car? Like I'm not actually sure. And I very much rely on John to tell me, is this serious or is this not serious? Um, my internal condition, I need to do the same thing. I would prefer to not have kind of regular warning signals that are just like on my internal dashboard because then I don't really know. Um, I want to know. And so I have to ask myself some questions. And so some things um, that I need to ask are, have I completed all my amends? Are all my amends done? Is there anything that I've left undone? Is there certain things that I'm doing very intentionally, specifically through the day? Am I carrying the message to others? Do I have others that I'm passing this message on to? And do I have the power to like bring all of the principles that I've learned into all of my affairs? And do I see that regardless of how long I've been emotionally sober, that if I say no to any of those questions, then I'm probably headed back into delusion. I'm probably in a danger zone. The warning signals are on my dashboard and I need to pay attention. Um, so the program tells me that I have um, the ability that to the degree that I work my program is the degree of power that I'm giving God. That's what this that's what this work has shown me is that I am not in charge. I'm not, God is my employer, God is the director, and I'm not in charge. And so there's only excuse me, there's only so many um um things that can kind of accumulate before things get blaring again. So when I start to see like if I'm doing a regular, sorry, if I'm doing a regular review, which is one of those things that are on my checklist, am I doing a regular review? Okay, so something comes up. So maybe in the evening I remember, oh right, I was telling so and so a story and I got kind of worked up about that. All right, so maybe there's something there. So now I make myself a little note. Okay, I think I need to go back and look at that because when I was telling that story, I got a little worked up. And so I need to actually sit down and maybe I need to take this sheet and decide like, do I actually need to do a resentment sheet here? Sorry. I wondered if I would make it through. Oh dear. My eyes are super watery. Um, so oh dear. The book tells me um, that when I get hurt or threatened, that when I'm in fear, that I get burned up. And I'm sorry, I'm looking at the big book. And this resentment, it is the number one offender. And I can see that. I know. And so I wanted to give you a practical example. There's someone in my life who lives super far away. I don't see them very often. And there was a time where if like their name came up, I would have a really strong reaction. And now that I've done this work, I can see like I can hear about this person, I can think about this person, I can run into this person, they can contact me, I can contact them. It's not an issue. Um, I wouldn't I wouldn't say that like we're gonna spend a ton of time together, but I feel like I am in a position of neutrality when it comes to the things that I used to hold on to and the hurt that I used to feel. And the only way that that happened was through God's power. By doing this work, by doing the resentments and the inventories laid out in the way that that the book lays them out. What I saw really clearly when I was doing this work is that I go into my relationships very needy. Um, and that I would say goes back probably even until childhood. My friendships that I had, my relationships that I had, I wouldn't say that from my perspective that I see now, I wouldn't say that I was in relationship to give or to make your life better or to be, to you the best friend that I could be. I went into my relationships really needy. I needed attention. I needed affection. I needed encouragement. I needed a lot of things from the people around me in order for me to feel okay. And um, that is actually a way that I created a lot of resentment because if I didn't get from you what I felt like I needed to feel good about myself, then that would create a resentment in me. Um, when um, when I am selfish and self-centered, and needy was an easier word to use, but when I am selfish and self-centered, I'm really going into a relationship about what can I get from other people. And I have a lot of grace and compassion for myself today for the way that I was and the way that I operated in relationships. As I did this work, I wasn't beating myself up about it. I actually felt very compassionate towards myself, and I still do. I actually, um, sometimes would say like little Vicky, like she didn't know any better. She only knew how to do the best that she could. And she was sad and she was lonely. She naturally felt like people didn't like her. She naturally felt like she didn't belong. And she tried to prove herself. And so I actually have tremendous compassion. And when I see it come up today, I'm not hard on myself about it. This isn't, this isn't a program of like beating myself up. This is just to see the truth. I want to see the truth because I don't actually want to stay with this garbage pile collected around me. I saw that even people pleasing fell into this category too. So I did a lot, I would say, for other people. I thought that I was a very much a people pleaser person. What I didn't realize is how selfish that I was being. And the problem there also is that as I do things for you to please you, if you don't respond in the way that I think that you should, I also create a resentment. And so they start to stack up. And, I really liked actually the way that Bruce talked last week. He talked about doing the right things for the wrong reasons. And I would say people pleasing very much for me falls into that category that, um, I think that I'm doing this for you, but really I'm doing it for myself. And it creates just a mountain of resentment for me. Excuse me. one of the things that was very helpful for me in looking at resentment was the fact that 7 deadly needs were brought up to my attention. That I have 7 deadly needs, and these are 7 areas where I can easily create resentment. Number 1 is the need to be right. And I would say that comes up a lot in my relationships, mostly in my marriage. Do I need to be right? Number 2 is the need to keep score. And I see this when you do something, and in my head, I'm thinking, that I want to talk to you about it because you did this. And I'm also going to point out to you where you did it there and where you did it last week and where you did it like 2 months ago. That's keeping score. And I can't afford to keep score. I actually, that's resentment because I held on to it and it's on my list now. I can't keep a list. Number 3 is the need to know. And this one for me comes up. I'm learning actually I've learned, I would say, to just let that go. If I don't understand, if you're talking about something, and you're not giving me all the information, I don't need to know. I actually can release that. And this has really, really helped me in the area of gossip specifically, because I don't need to know. I don't need the information, and I don't actually necessarily want the information. And so that's been really helpful. Sometimes when people are telling a story, I let them be as vague as possible, as vague as they want to be. And I'm actually learning also to be vague too, because I don't need the details. I don't need the information. And I don't have to have all the answers to everything. I don't, even this work, even this book, like even the Bible, even the big book, it will be revealed to me as God wants it to be revealed to me. And I just need to be open and willing and searching. Number 4 is the need to get even. It's very deadly. You talk rude to me, so I'm going to talk rude back to you. Again, that one is most common in my home, and really a habit that I would say a habit and a pattern that both John and I are like really trying to be intentional to break. Like just because I think somebody kind of was short with me, I do not want to live under needing to get even. Number 5 is the need to judge. And yeah, I would say, the way that I look at that one is like, I can see the evidence that's in front of me, but when I start to try to look for the reasons why, then I'm in judgment. I don't want to be oblivious to like what's in front of me, but it is really deadly for me to be looking at someone else's motives. Like that's not for me to decide. And I need to let them be have their own walk with God and with themselves. Number 6 is the need to control. That is super deadly for me. I cannot control situations, circumstances, people, how they respond, how they talk, how they treat me, how they show up. I'm responsible for my behavior and for my actions, and that's a big enough job. That's a big enough job that I need all of God's help with. And number 7 is the need to look good. And that one, that one is, people pleasing falls in there. What you think of me, how I show up in the world, how the world sees me. I actually think and worry about that more than I like to admit. And it brings a lot of fear. It brings a lot of fear, and then fear creates the resentments in me because excuse me, because I'm not in control. And then I'm not letting God be in charge because I'm trying to run the show. And so in all of these areas, those 7 deadly needs, those are just ways that I see like resentment creep up because I'm not in charge and I'm not in control, but I'm trying to be. And so, excuse me. So for all the LifeLab participants, I just wanted to give some maybe helpful tools at identifying, when we go through, especially for those who are going through the work the first time, we want to be thorough. We want to be, I think I did like 17, but I began to realize that a lot of them kind of fell into the same categories. There was like a little bit of um, repetitiveness to what was going on. Excuse me. But it was just really important. Um, and I need to see, um, I need to see, I really feel like I need to see in order for it to be removed. And how it's removed, like I can't answer that, but it's it's the power of God. By being willing and doing the work intentionally, I really saw how we continue on this path and it just gets easier. It gets easier. I become lighter. Um, and it's the internal that changes, not the external. Everything else on the outside can be the same, but what happens inside of me becomes so different. And so as I'm going to just read from what we call in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's called the bedevilments on page 52. And so these are like the warning signals that just put in a better way of what's going on with me. And so am I having trouble with personal relationships? Can I control my emotional nature? Am I prey to misery and depression? Can I make a living? Do I have a feeling of uselessness? Am I full of fear? Am I unhappy? Can I be of real help to other people? And through this work, through doing this process intentionally, I begin to be able to answer those questions. Yes, I began to see that I can take action where I need to take action. And the feeling of uselessness that I had, and for me, I would describe the feeling of uselessness was often like just not feeling good enough in certain areas, or feeling like, oh, I keep failing over here, I keep failing over there. That can take it took a long time to leave me. And the reality was that I started to see that I worshiped my feelings, and that letting those thoughts and emotions run me, I resented so much about myself even, and I was really worshiping my feelings instead of reading what God said about me and how God saw me, and believing that, and actually like being willing to do the work without beating myself up, was actually fully surrendering myself to God. I don't know if that makes sense. But it's really the only way that I can describe like how that switched for me. That this like idea of self-love that's so common in the world right now, that was me applying God's love to myself. And instead of trying to fix myself, I'm standing with God, asking God to fix me. And instead of always looking for the right person to do the right things for me, I am asking God to let me be the right person for others.